It took the Gulf War to make us notice just how much has changed between the sexes. Day after day of the crisis, we saw men and women working side by side in the field. Saw fathers and mothers separated from their families, putting themselves in harm's way. The U.S. Senate noticed too, today joining the House in voting to allow female military pilots to fly combat missions, which stirs up an old hornet's nest. In the old days, it was politically fashionable to say women are the gentler sex. And then it was fashionable to say the only real difference between little girls and little boys is the plumbing. And now, well, now we're confused. So tonight, let's bring you up to date. Science's latest picture of what makes men men and women women. First, some background from Harvard scientist and ABC correspondent Michael Gillen.
Scientifically speaking, Greg and Terry are members of the species Homo sapiens, the personification of millions of years of evolution. Politically speaking, though, they're pilots in the U.S. Air Force who happen to be members of the opposite sex, the personification of an age-old debate that heated up again today in the Senate.
Women have proven themselves. The documentation is clear and well documented. The best arguments are performance, experience, and aptitude. And women military pilots have come through with flying colors on all three accounts.
I think that it's important to recognize again, this is a national defense issue. It's not a women's rights issue.
Today's debate was carried out in a political arena, but it raises questions that are being studied in a scientific arena. Do women have what it takes to be combat soldiers? Are males the superior sex, or are females? What science is discovering might make politicians think differently about the differences between the two sexes. Globally, there are as many as 50 million different kinds of plants and animals. Some, like snails, have only one sex, and some, like honeybees, have what amount to 3 different sexes. The vast majority of plants and animals, though, have 2 sexes.
If you have 2 sexes, you avoid inbreeding. If you're just male or just female, you can't self-fertilize. You can't have inbred progeny.
Among elephant seals, the 2 sexes are very different from one another in size, weight, and temperament. On the other extreme is the wolf, where the 2 sexes are very similar. They have roughly the same body weight, and both sexes hunt and take care of the young. Increasingly, scientists are finding that human beings are more like wolves than like elephant seals. In fact, they've discovered that in the early stages of life, the 2 sexes are virtually indistinguishable.
Well, essentially, until about week 6 of gestation, they're identical, the male and the female fetus. They have the same sex organs that will eventually develop in the female into an ovary and in the male into testes. The same vital organs, the same reproductive structures.
After 6 weeks, some fetuses suddenly begin to produce testosterone. At that point, they clearly become males.
Those hormones begin this inexorable process of altering the plumbing, of altering the structure of the body. If they weren't there, we develop into females, all of us.
At birth, there are obvious sexual differences, of course. But beyond that, scientists are realizing something quite remarkable.
At birth, the male and female infants are very much the same, despite these physical differences. And even in adulthood, although we see some differences between the sexes in behavior, by and large, we're similar.
That doesn't mean there aren't sex differences. And it doesn't mean there aren't consistent sex differences.
In adulthood, the average male is bigger than the average female. Bigger heart, bigger lungs, bigger body, bigger muscles. On the flip side, the average female has better senses, better sight, better taste, better smell, better touch, better hearing. When it comes to the brain, there are a few differences, but outwardly things look pretty equal, even to the expert eye.
If you were to put 2 brains in front of me, I would not be able to say for certain whether one was a male and the other female, or whether they were both males or both females.
Females live longer by 7 years, even though males start out ahead of the game. 105 males are born for every 100 females, but then they start to die off. By middle age, it's down to 98 males for every 100 females, And by old age, only 72 males are left for every 100 females. A soldier is supposed to be aggressive, and on that score, there is a big sexual difference. Every year, about 15,000 males commit murder compared to 2,000 females. Is aggression in humans caused by male testosterone? Well, here, the jury is still out. When it comes to animal studies, things are a little more clear-cut. When you inject female rats with testosterone, for example, they do become more aggressive. But since rats and humans are so different genetically, drawing any conclusions from this study raises more questions than it answers. A soldier also has to be disciplined, and on that score, the testosterone can be a liability. According to a recent study of Vietnam veterans, soldiers with the highest testosterone levels were most likely to go AWOL or end up in the brig.
Probably it's the case that individual variety in all kinds of behaviors that we measure swamps the sex differences. We will never do a good job if we use sex differences as our major measure of the difference between people, because there is so much of this variety.
Take height, for example. The average woman is about 64 inches tall. The average man, 5 inches taller. But there are many, men and women, who fall above and below the averages.
I think what science has to say is that men and women run the full gamut of behavior and of brain structure.
Increasingly, scientists are finding that these kinds of variations exist for all traits, including strength, endurance, and aggression. So that in the scientific arena, at least, the old idea that one sex is absolutely superior to the other is proving to be just a lot of hot air. I'm Michael Gillen for Nightline in New York.